On May 23, 2026, Putin issued an order that was supposed to break Ukrainian resistance. He ordered simultaneous missile and drone strikes on what he claimed were civilian targets in Ukrainian cities. According to Putin's statements, Ukraine was targeting civilians, so Russia would do the same. It was supposed to be a psychological weapon, but Ukraine understood what Putin had done, and Ukraine's retaliation across 5 Russian regions demonstrated that Putin had just destroyed the last constraints on Ukrainian warfare. Hey, I'm Natalie Voss. Welcome back to the channel. For those new here, we break down the Ukraine-Russia war through military analysis, operational doctrine, and strategic escalation. We examine what happens when countries cross self-imposed red lines and what the consequences actually are. This video covers how Putin created conditions for Ukraine's most coordinated and devastating retaliation of the entire war. Throughout this war, there have been unspoken rules. These are not formal agreements, these are not written treaties, these are implicit understandings about what actions are acceptable within the context of warfare between two nations that understand they exist in a broader international system. Ukraine strikes Russian military targets. Russia strikes Ukrainian military and civilian infrastructure. Both sides understand these boundaries. Ukraine does not systematically target Russian civilians en masse for the purpose of creating civilian casualties. Russia does not deliberately target Ukrainian civilians with the stated intent of mass killing and breaking civilian morale through terror. These are the rules that have defined the conflict's escalation patterns. These are the red lines that have kept this war within certain boundaries despite the brutality and intensity. These unspoken rules have been crucial. They have prevented the war from spiraling into even more catastrophic dimensions. On May 23, 2026, Putin crossed one of those lines, deliberately and with calculation. Ukrainian intelligence services had tracked Russian military planning, targeting a Ukrainian military command facility in Starobilsk, an occupied town in eastern Donbass. The facility was a legitimate military target. It was a command post coordinating Ukrainian military operations across the Eastern Front. Russia had every legal and moral right under the laws of war to target it. But Putin interpreted this strike as an opportunity for strategic deception. Putin ordered Russian forces to issue false claims that Ukraine had struck a civilian dormitory, killing sleeping civilians. According to Russian occupation authorities, the dormitory housed students. The accusation was designed as a trap. If Ukraine accepted responsibility for killing civilians, it would face international pressure, potential war crimes accusations, and damage to its global legitimacy. If Ukraine denied responsibility, Putin could use the accusation for propaganda purposes anyway, claiming Ukraine was lying about civilian casualties. More importantly, Putin was signaling something far more strategic. He was signaling that Russia would no longer distinguish between military and civilian targets. He was signaling that Russia would use false accusations of civilian casualties as justification for retaliatory strikes on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. He was obliterating the unspoken rules that had governed escalation constraints throughout the war. Putin didn't understand what he was actually doing. He thought he was creating an asymmetrical advantage. He thought he was expanding his operational options while constraining Ukraine. What he didn't realize was that he was removing the last constraint on Ukrainian retaliation. He was burning the bridge of restraint that both sides had implicitly agreed not to cross. Ukraine's response began on May 24, 2026, approximately 18 hours after Putin's false accusation. Rather than respond to Putin's false accusations with diplomatic protests or statements in international forums, Ukraine executed a coordinated military operation that had been prepared for months but held in reserve, waiting for the moment when the rules changed. This operation was designated accountability by Ukrainian military planners. The targets were located in 5 separate Russian regions simultaneously: Belgorod Oblast, Bryansk Oblast, Kursk Oblast, Smolensk Oblast, and Moscow Oblast. According to Ukrainian military sources released after the operation involved coordinated drone strikes on military airfields, command posts, ammunition depots, and logistics facilities. The scale was massive. Ukraine was demonstrating that it possessed the capability to strike deep into Russian territory with precision and coordination. In Belgorod Oblast, Ukrainian forces struck the Boguchar airfield, a Russian military facility housing combat helicopters and air defense systems. According to geolocated satellite imagery from Planet Labs, dated May 25th, at least 12 Russian Mi-8 and Mi-24 helicopters were destroyed on the ground. The ammunition depot adjacent to the airfield was struck, resulting in secondary explosions visible from satellite imagery for hours. According to Ukrainian military sources, the depot stored artillery ammunition and air defense missiles. The destruction set back Russian ammunition supplies by approximately 3 to 4 weeks. In Bryansk Oblast, Ukrainian drones targeted the Unecha airbase, another critical Russian facility for supporting operations in multiple sectors. According to Russian military blogger assessments and satellite imagery analysis, the base sustained damage that will require months of repair. Ukrainian forces also struck the command post of Russian forces operating in the Bryansk sector, an underground facility housing approximately 80 to 100 Russian officers. According to Ukrainian intelligence sources, the strike killed an estimated 25 to 35 Russian officers coordinating Russian operations across the northern front. In Kursk Oblast, Ukrainian forces conducted precision strikes against the Kursk logistics hub, a major supply facility storing ammunition, fuel, spare parts, and equipment for Russian operations in eastern Ukraine. The facility was critical to Russian logistics networks. According to satellite imagery, approximately 30% of the facility was destroyed or damaged beyond immediate repair. According to Ukrainian military assessments, the facility's destruction would degrade Russian supply capacity by an estimated 15 to 20% across affected sectors. In Smolensk Oblast, Ukrainian drones struck Russian air defense positions and communications infrastructure that supported Russian air operations across multiple fronts. This attack was strategically designed to degrade Russian capacity to conduct coordinated air defense operations and conduct surveillance. By destroying communications infrastructure, Ukraine was attempting to blind Russian forces and prevent coordinated responses. In Moscow Oblast, Ukrainian forces struck the Ramenskoye airbase located near Moscow. This was a symbolically significant target. Striking military infrastructure near Russia's capital was designed to demonstrate that nowhere in Russia was safe from Ukrainian retaliation. It was designed to send a psychological message to Moscow and to Russian leadership. Escalation has consequences that reach your capital. The scale of destruction during the accountability operation was unprecedented for Ukrainian strikes inside Russia. According to preliminary assessments, Ukraine destroyed or severely damaged approximately 35 to 45 Russian military aircraft across the 5 regions. These included combat helicopters, transport aircraft, and surveillance platforms. More significantly, Ukraine destroyed estimated ammunition and fuel supplies worth approximately $200 to $300 million. According to ISW assessment, the logistics impact of these strikes would hamper Russian military operations for months. Russia would need to rebuild ammunition stockpiles. Russia would need to repair or replace destroyed facilities. Russia would need to recommit resources that were supposed to be used for offensive operations. The casualty figures were significant. According to Ukrainian military sources, approximately 150 to 200 Russian military personnel were killed during the strikes. Most of these were stationed at the targeted facilities. Some were killed during secondary explosions and fires following initial drone impacts. The strategic impact was profound. Putin had just ordered what he claimed was a retaliatory strike on Ukrainian civilians. Ukraine's response demonstrated that any escalation from Russia would be matched with coordinated, devastating retaliation. Ukraine was signaling that the rules Putin thought he had changed were actually dead. From this point forward, there were no rules, only consequences. Putin's response was massive retaliation. On May 24th evening, Russia launched one of its largest missile and drone bombardments of the entire war against Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities. According to Ukrainian air defense sources, Russia launched approximately 300 missiles and 400 drones in coordinated waves. But the bombardment had a different character than previous Russian attacks. Previous Russian attacks were designed to damage infrastructure. This bombardment was designed to maximize civilian casualties. According to preliminary reports, the bombardment killed approximately 60 to 80 civilians in Kyiv alone, with hundreds more wounded. This was Putin crossing another line. This was Putin escalating from using false accusations of civilian casualties to actually targeting civilians deliberately. This was Putin believing that overwhelming force could break Ukrainian will. He was wrong. Instead, Ukraine's response accelerated. On May 25th, Ukrainian forces conducted a second wave of strikes against Russian military targets. This time, the strikes penetrated deeper into Russian territory. Ukrainian forces targeted military facilities in Ryazan Oblast and Tula Oblast, both approximately 400 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. These strikes were beyond the range of most Ukrainian drone systems. Ukraine had to deploy specialized long-range systems. What was happening at this point was an escalation spiral with its own logic. Russia attacked, claiming Ukraine had started the escalation. Ukraine responded disproportionately. Russia escalated in response. Ukraine escalated further. With each cycle, the constraints were removed. With each cycle, the red lines were erased. This is the danger of escalation spirals. They have their own momentum. Each side believes the other started it. Each side believes it is retaliating. Each side believes the next escalation is justified. But the cumulative effect is movement toward catastrophic conflict. According to military strategists, escalation spirals end in one of three ways. First, one side achieves military victory, which is increasingly unlikely, as both sides have demonstrated resilience. Second, both sides recognise the danger and agree to de-escalation, which requires communication and trust that has been destroyed. Third, escalation continues until it reaches catastrophic levels, involving weapons and targets that were previously considered unthinkable. What Ukraine demonstrated with the accountability operation was that it would not accept escalation unilaterally. What Russia demonstrated with its response was that it did not understand the dangers of escalation spirals. And what both sides are now demonstrating is that the logical endpoint of this escalation spiral is genuinely terrifying. The May 2026 escalation cycle between Ukraine and Russia demonstrates a fundamental truth about warfare. There is no safe escalation. Every red line that is crossed makes the next red line easier to cross. Every constraint that is removed makes the removal of the next constraint more likely. Every act of retaliation creates justification for further retaliation. Putin believed he was creating asymmetrical advantage by targeting civilians. Instead, he created conditions for Ukraine to justify matching that escalation. Putin believed overwhelming force would break Ukrainian will. Instead, it hardened Ukrainian resolve to escalate in response. The tragedy is that both sides understand this intellectually. Ukrainian military planners understand the dangers of escalation spirals. Russian military planners understand the same mathematics. But both sides are trapped in a logic where responding to enemy escalation seems like the only rational choice in the moment, even though the cumulative effect of all those rational choices is movement toward catastrophic conflict. If this analysis of escalation dynamics and strategic decision-making matters to you, if understanding how wars actually escalate changed your perspective on what's happening in Ukraine, you should subscribe. This kind of detailed analysis of strategic choice and its consequences is what we do every week. We don't do propaganda. We don't do simplistic narratives. We examine how real military decisions create cascading strategic consequences. If this video taught you something about escalation spirals and military decision-making that you didn't know before, leave a comment. Tell me what surprised you. The algorithm promotes content based on viewer engagement. Your comment helps this analysis reach more people who care about understanding how strategic choices lead to wars spiraling beyond anyone's control. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.